Rise and shine, porcupines. It's Algebra with Al time. I'm your host, Al Rosetti. Today we're looking at Chapter 2, Unit 7. We're talking about parent functions and their transformations. So students will be able to identify the type of function it is and the transformation. The concept is transformations. The skill is being able to identify the function. What do you say we get ready? Here we go. So let's look at the first one. It says identify the type of function represented by each graph. Now, as Algebra 2 students, it almost seems silly for me to say this, but of course, any graph of a straight line, you know and I know is linear, right? So that's a linear function, it's a straight line. We should also know at this point in our mathematical evolution that number 2 is a parabola, and that a parabola can only be derived when we have a quadratic. Okay, let's look at number 3. You see the absolute value signs there around x, don't you? So this obviously is an absolute value graph. Okay, the -2 would move it down 2, but that's not what they want from us. What they want from us, what type of function is it? And this is an absolute value function, right? So what I'm going to do, even though they don't necessarily ask for this, I'm going to show you the transformation because we just were doing this. I want to make sure we understand it. So what would the -2 do outside the brackets, right? So if it's positive, we would take that whole thing and move it up. If it's negative, we're going to move it down. So we're going to take the parent function, graph it again, down 2 units because it's -2. So instead of 0, 0, we're going to start at what? 0, -2, right? Instead of being at 1, 1, we're going to be at -1, 1. Okay, that's what the parent function does. Outside the brackets, we move it down 2 units. And there we have it. Okay, so let's talk about the graph of number 4. Okay, so you see the square term there outside the parentheses, right? We should know, like I said, in our mathematical journey at this point in time, we should know anytime we see something to the second power or squared that that is a quadratic. Okay? Doesn't matter what the form is, there's several forms that we can put the quadratic in, right? There's several different forms, but if it's got one square term in it and one variable, we know it's a quadratic. Okay? So there's the parent function of the quadratic, right? 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 4, 3, 9, right? So what does the +1 in the parentheses do to that function? Now, what we have to pay attention now is, you see the +1, and of course we want to say, okay, +1, for some reason to us that means right. We want to move it right. But it's just the opposite. Think about it. If we were to solve x + 1 = 0, we'd subtract 1 from both sides, and x would be -1. So that's the math behind it. So you see +1, we're going to take that entire graph, we're going to move everything over 1 unit. And if we know the parent function, like I just said, it's 0, 0, 1, 1, -2, 4, +2, 4. We know where it starts, we know we can move everything over 1 unit. So it's been translated 1 unit to the left. All right, so here we have y equals -x. Obviously, this is a linear function, right? It's a straight line. But what's the translation when it's y equals -x? So what the negative does in front of the variable, just the negative by itself, is it means it wants its opposite. Think about it. So if I have 5 and I want its opposite, right? It would be -5. So when you see the negative in front of the variable, you're telling me whatever x is, y is going to be its opposite. So if x is 1, y is -1. If x is 2, y is -2. So we reflected that in the x-axis. That's all that does. The opposite of what it was, we flipped it, there it is. No table of values needed. All right, So we just got done saying what the negative does in front of the brackets, and it flipped it, right? It takes the function and it just flips it. All right, number 7. Even if you don't understand what this word problem is asking, as soon as you see that U up there and it wants to know what kind of function it is that they're using in this word problem, it's a quadratic. Parabola is a quadratic. That's all there is to it. So if we know the parent functions, that's easy. Well, that's all we have time for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here. Remember, math, math, math. Get up and do some math.